Welcome back to another episode of the Outdoor Adventures podcast here on Brownfield. I'm Brent Barnett, and we're still talking turkey season here in the month of May. And this week we're heading off to the state of Nebraska. Greg Wagner joining us from Nebraska Game and Parks. How's it going, Greg?
It's going well. Thank you.
You bet. Hey, thanks for joining us here on the show. Might tell the listeners more about some of your work there in Nebraska and more with your job and some of the work you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yep. I'm kind of the old war horse. I've been around 45 years with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, and I've worked in various divisions. I have a couple degrees behind my name, big deal. I'm a country boy. I'm a farm boy to boot. I'm a lifelong Nebraskan. I always tease people and tell them I know Nebraska intricately, but I might be lost and needing help in Iowa, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, any of the border states.
Hey, how's your turkey season gone up to this point? For me personally, I'm in central Iowa. Our season's over at this point, and I didn't fill any tags, but it happens.
It happens. If it was easy, Brent, we wouldn't be doing this, right? That's what my wife tells me of 38 years, but our turkey season has gone better than expected here. We do have lower numbers of birds. There's no question about that, like Iowa or a lot of the other states. But observations with hunters, empirical observations off the cuff have been improved. We ran some numbers, and as of May 1st, our harvest was 19% ahead of last year. So that's a very good indicator. With our telecheck system, you have to check in your bearded bird after you harvest it. So and we have a lot of hunting that's done in May, so we think we're pretty good. But people were seeing more birds, a lot more younger birds. There were encouraging signs, and our turkey season goes all the way till the end of the month, goes through Friday, May 31st. So we've got people that are still out there sweating a little bit in the woods.
You know, I think it's interesting. Nebraska does have a pretty lengthy season, Greg. You know, where I'm at, things get started about, mid-April or so, and they kind of tail off early May. Does the longer season dates help out as far as getting hunter numbers out there?
I think so. I think it spreads out a lot of pressure. Our archery season begins March 25th and goes all the way till the end of May. And our shotgun seasons, the youth generally is early April, and then it'll be middle April with the regular shotgun season. We have one of the longer seasons that's around. It's, very continuous. So I would tell folks, one of the reasons we attract a lot of non-residents here is we don't have units. We don't have the state busted up into sections or units, and we have long seasons that are very attractive, especially with spring weather, as we both know, can be really pivotal. And if you've got a short time frame there, you might be toast as far as trying to get out to bag a gobbler with stormy or rainy weather.
Do you have mixed flocks in Nebraska? You know, I'm obviously familiar with Eastern turkeys, but do you have Merriam's as well?
We do. And I will tell you that Greg Wagner will always tell it like it is. Most of our birds are hybrids. Even the Merriam's are hybrids. They're very hybridized. But what we have here in Nebraska are generally hybrids. Do we have Merriam's hybrids? Oh, yeah. Mostly in the northern tier of the state and in the northwestern area of Nebraska, some in the panhandle. But we have the Merriam's birds with the beautiful, bright, white tail feather tips. We have some Rio Grandes. They're in the very south central, southwestern portion of Nebraska. They didn't take real well when they were being reintroduced in the 70s. So we have some pockets of them. And then we have the eastern hybrid pretty much throughout the state. Mostly, I would tell you, in about the eastern half. So we have variability as far as, the subspecies that we had. In I think it was 58 or 59, we released Merriam's birds. They were from South Dakota and Wyoming in northwest Nebraska. They spread across the northern tier. And a lot of the people still trying to go after that pure Merriam's are going to want to hunt the Pine Ridge country of northwest Nebraska.
Those Easterns, they can be pretty investigative when they come in. They're kind of antsy. What's it like hunting Merriam's? Are they pretty vocalized and able to come into the calls?
They are. A turkey's a turkey, but there are some differences. especially with the Merriam's birds. And I've hunted the Pine Ridge quite a bit and the northern tier of the state. And there seems to be more predators after them, so they're warier. They're just a lot warier. And it helps, believe it or not, to have a decoy that would be Merriam's like, a little lighter colored, not the dark chocolate toms that the Easterns are. Believe it or not, that helps. And it takes Merriam's birds in some of that rougher country in northern Nebraska and in the northwestern part of the state, foothills to the Black Hills, Pine Ridge, quite a while to get to you. And you have to be a lot more patient.
For hunters not familiar with your territory, can you kind of break down the different landscapes you have, going from the eastern part of the state and out further west?
Yeah, sure. In eastern Nebraska, we have rolling hill farm country. It looks a lot like Iowa, western Iowa and central Iowa. So you're looking at rolling hill farm country, lots of row crops, and then timbered creek bottoms. And we have some expanses of timber, but it's basically ag land. You get to central Nebraska, about Broken Bow in the middle of the state, then the terrain changes dramatically. It becomes very arid-like. It becomes what we call sandhills, an ecoregion here in Nebraska with yucca plants and sands and blowouts and such, and different grasses that grow there. And that goes all the way to the western edge of Nebraska. And in the southwestern part of Nebraska, if we would go there, what you're looking at is kind of a mix of some of that sandhills country with some of ponderosa pines, some pine trees, big, deep canyon country. So it's very different there. Then you move north to the northwestern part of Nebraska to what we call the Pine Ridge Escarpment, which is kind of a horseshoe, an extended horseshoe. And that basically is foothills to Black Hills. It's pine-studded rocky outcroppings in buttes. And if you move back from there and come east on the Niobrara River Valley, it's still going to be rugged. It's going to be beautiful. Ponderosa pines, canyons. You're in cattle country, basically, in the western half of the state. And it's gorgeous. I think, especially in hunting the West in Nebraska, that 90% of it is just being out in that country. You never know what you might see.
Do the turkeys have a pretty good population in the western part when you talk about that wide open range?
They do. They're very, I would say, adaptable. They've adapted to pockets of habitat that we have in the sandhills. Most of those are going to be where we have a lot of forested or woodland type areas along the rivers and the creek bottoms, but it's not uncommon in the middle of the sandhills to have a grove of about 50 cottonwood trees and maybe a few other hardwood trees, some that have fallen over, and there's a flock of turkeys there. And we know now with some of the research we're doing with the University of Nebraska at Lincoln that our turkeys in the West travel great distances seasonally, either to find food or to breed.
Something I've been interested to kind of pick your brain about, Greg. We've been dealing with some really dry weather patterns the last 3 years. We've had extreme drought conditions all across the Midwest. Now, things have changed here this spring. We've had a wetter than expected spring, but did the drought the past few years have any impact on the populations at all? I didn't know if that was something that impacted the turkeys.
We believe it has. There's no question it has impacted our upland game bird populations, pheasant, turkeys, especially the ground nesting birds. No question that it has. It limiting food sources in some areas. Some turkeys have had to travel further for food, but drought conditions generally really limit some production and limit upland game bird numbers in Nebraska. Now, right now, we're going through a much wetter spring, and as long as we don't have the cool weather, that'll help our turkeys because we'll have a lot of cover for the poults. We just don't want it cool with the rainy conditions in June. That's the big thing. And it'll help our deer populations too. We are seeing lower numbers of deer in Nebraska. It'll help them.
Like Greg said, the season in the state goes through the end of May here. Greg, we have a few minutes left on the podcast today. I wanted to kind of look ahead to the fall. Deer season will be here before you know it with the archery season. What's the opener look like for the state?
I think our deer populations, I think they're stable. I think they're good. I think in some areas they're below normal. You really need to quiz your landowner or quiz our wild game managers if you're coming here to Nebraska to hunt, because our populations vary. We still have our densest populations of deer along the state's river corridors or creek systems. Those are our whitetails. Our mule deer, they've kind of taken it in the shorts a little bit, so to speak, with the drought conditions. So you really need to touch base with our wildland managers or with landowners if you're coming to the west, especially to hunt mule deer. So I would say we're stable. I would probably say good in most areas, maybe subpar in other areas. It just varies, but we have backed off our permits this year quite a bit to try to recover some of those populations, but still being responsive to landowners that have crop depredation problems.
For you personally, what's your experience been like hunting deer in the state? Do you have any good stories top of mind you could give to the listeners?
Yeah, I'm a landowner as well. I'm a farmer. I'm a farm kid, and we have a pretty large farm. We manage it for agriculture, but we also manage it for wildlife. So our deer populations look really good. And I would tell you that in Nebraska, especially our archery season is one of our better kept secrets, I think. We open September 1st. So if you wanted to try to get a buck and velvet, you could with a bow. And season goes all the way through the firearm season, as long as you wear blaze orange cap and vest, till December 31st. And so one of the longest seasons in the country. And that I think is really a great season. And in a tree stand along the Platte River that spans Nebraska, that's where our farm is. It's not too far away from the border of Iowa and Nebraska from the Missouri River, but we're on the Platte. I've seen everything from my tree stand. Bobcats, no mountain lions yet, bobcats, turkeys, all kinds of songbirds. You never know what you might see, probably similar to Iowa, but there are never dull moments, and every hunt is different. There's no question about that. I would tell you, I've gone to hunting, with a little bit more primitive bow, and the stick bows. Oh boy, is that challenging. No success as of yet, but stay tuned on that.
Yeah, I'm not brave enough to try that yet. That props to you. That's awesome. I hope you get one with traditional
Ooh,
equipment there.
we'll see. 61-year-old Greg Wagner. We'll see.
That'd be awesome. You mentioned the September 1 open. Where I'm at, it's October 1st in Iowa. So I've never bow hunted that early before, early September, Greg. So I'm does that really change up kind of your strategy when they're still on those summer patterns like that then?
Yeah, the crop harvest hasn't begun. Yes, there are a lot of bugs. Yes, you're sweating. Um, those things all need to be taken into account. Deer have not begun to pattern themselves because they're coming off summer and they're still in their summer mode. So it's a whole different ball game. Oftentimes, we all know with whitetails, the bedding areas don't change a lot, and some of their main trails don't change a lot. I tell people to find those. Water has been real crucial to find or be near that time of year. And especially too, as the corn is matured, those deer are in soybeans early on, but they're in corn about that time. But they're not transitioning yet. And I would hunt the cool mornings. The mornings seem to be more productive than the afternoons because they're cooler, and that's when deer seem to move a lot more.
Well, a velvet buck, that would be right on the top of the list of the dream list there for me. That would be something.
There you go.
Hey, Greg, really appreciate the time today. And thank you for coming on the show. If anyone wants to stay connected with Nebraska Game and Parks, how do they do it?
We have a website. It's a real good one. It's very interactive. outdoornebraska.gov. And you can find me anywhere on social media platforms or who knows where. And I'll always take time for you to help you come to Nebraska, the good life.
Greg, thanks a lot. We'll have to have you back on sometime soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Again, that's Greg Wagner with Nebraska Game and Parks. Thanks for joining us this week on the Outdoor Adventures podcast on Brownfield. I'm Brent Barnett.